Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. We are diving deep into the world of the SOC
The
analyst.
Security Operations Center analyst.
Yeah, and if you're here, it's probably because you're interested in getting into cybersecurity. And this is a very common and pretty popular entry point.
Absolutely, a lot of people are interested in this.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of great resources today, really digging into what a SOC analyst does, what the essential skills are that you need to really excel.
And we want to make sure that you're not overwhelmed if you're trying to get into this field. Because there's a lot of different information out there. There's a lot of different paths you can take. So hopefully this can provide you with some nice clarity and some real actionable steps that you can take to break into this role. But first, I think we need to really define what a SOC analyst is.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. I mean,
Ah.
what are we actually talking about here?
Hmm.
So, uh, SOC, that stands for Security Operations Center. Really, you can think of it as the central nervous system for an organization's security. It's where all the monitoring and analysis of an organization's security posture happens. And the SOC analyst, they're really the first line of defense. They're the ones who are constantly on the lookout for those cyber threats.
So what are they actually doing on a day-to-day basis?
So a huge part of their time is spent monitoring security alerts
Okay.
and logs from different security tools. One of the main ones is a SIEM.
Okay.
A SIEM is a security information and event management system.
So what does a SIEM actually do?
So a SIEM is basically like a big log aggregator.
Oh, okay.
It pulls together security data from across an organization's entire IT infrastructure.
So it's taking in a lot of data.
A ton of data. And a good SOC analyst, they're able to sift through all of that data, and they're able to find those critical needles in the haystack. And that's one of the skills that they really develop over time, is that ability to see the patterns and correlate those events, to uncover those sophisticated multi-stage attacks.
Yeah, so it's not just about seeing an alert, it's about understanding what that alert actually means.
Absolutely. And then once they spot something, they've got to analyze those suspicious activities,
Right.
see if it's an actual security incident,
Okay.
and then they have to respond to those incidents.
So what does responding to an incident look like?
I mean, it could be anything from isolating a computer that's been compromised to, taking those initial steps to contain a potential data breach.
Okay.
And they might need to escalate
Right.
certain threats to more senior security teams.
Okay, so how do they know when to escalate something?
So they need to be able to recognize when a threat is beyond their scope or if it's something really critical.
Hmm.
And then they need to know how to gather the right information and how to get that information to the senior security teams so that they can do that deeper investigation.
Now, besides just reacting to those threats, is there a proactive element to this role?
There is. Um, a lot of resources talked about the importance of threat intelligence.
Okay.
So this involves looking at those emerging threats, understanding attack patterns,
Okay.
and even, digging into those logs to try to anticipate those potential future threats.
So it's not just putting out fires, it's trying to predict where the next fire might start.
Exactly. And by analyzing those logs, by staying informed about new threats,
Yeah.
they can contribute to, really bolstering that organization's defenses.
Now, I think there's another part of this role that maybe isn't quite as exciting, but it's still extremely important, and that is the documentation.
Yeah, the documentation and reporting.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
Because if an incident isn't properly documented,
Right.
you're not going to be able to learn from it and improve those processes. And these reports, they become those crucial data points for, understanding trends and really just refining that organization's overall security posture.
So it really is a very dynamic role. It's not just theoretical. It's a lot of hands-on experience.
Absolutely. You're applying those skills.
Yeah.
You're applying your knowledge to actual security events.
Yeah.
It's why it's such a great entry point into cybersecurity.
Yeah.
You get experience by doing.
So how do you, if you are interested in this field, how do you actually get started?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Right.
And our resources had some really great tips. But the overarching theme is build that strong foundation of knowledge.
Right.
Don't get caught up in chasing the latest tools.
It's like one of the sources said, tools come and go, but fundamental knowledge of security concepts stays forever.
Exactly. And I think that's really important to remember. The specific software might change,
Right.
but those underlying security principles, those remain constant.
Right. The fundamentals never change.
Exactly. So the resources talked about three core areas
Okay.
that are super important. First, OS basics,
Okay.
and that includes both Windows and Linux internals.
So when we say OS internals, what are we actually talking about?
So it's basically understanding how an operating system works
Okay.
on a fundamental level. So you need to know about things like processes, how applications run,
Yeah.
what resources they use. You need to understand the file system, where data is stored, how it's organized. You need to know about user permissions, who has access to what, and then logs, those detailed records of system activity.
Right, and how do these skills, how does that knowledge actually help a SOC analyst?
I mean, think about it. A lot of times the first evidence of malicious activity,
Right.
you find that in the logs. So you need to be able to read those logs. You need to be able to understand what they're telling you. If you see a process with a weird name, or if you see some files being accessed,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be accessed. That's how you know that something might be wrong.
Okay.
So that's the first one, OS basics.
Okay, what's the second one?
The second one is networking fundamentals,
Okay.
and in particular, understanding TCP/IP, so the communication protocols that power the internet, DNS, domain name system,
Mm-hmm.
and ports and services, how different applications communicate on the network.
Okay, so why is understanding the network so important for a SOC analyst?
Well, so much malicious activity leaves traces in the network traffic.
Right.
So if you understand network protocols, you can start to recognize those patterns,
Okay.
right? You can see those unusual communication patterns. You
Mhm.
can identify those potentially malicious connections, and you can understand how attackers are trying to move around the network.
Yeah.
You might see traffic going to a port that shouldn't be open,
Right.
or you might see a weird DNS query. These are all red flags. You might even see DNS tunneling,
Okay.
where attackers hide data in normal-looking DNS traffic.
So they're kind of disguising their bad activity.
Yeah,
as
sharper
their-
traffic.
Exactly. So you need to be able to look beyond the surface.
Right.
And understand what's really going on.
Okay, so the first one was OS basics. The second one was networking fundamentals. What's the third?
The third is basic scripting.
Okay.
And the resources highlighted Bash, Python, and PowerShell as good languages to know. Okay. And why would a SOC analyst need to know how to code?
Well, automation is a huge part of cybersecurity, especially when you're dealing with these huge amounts of data.
Right.
You need to be able to automate those repetitive tasks. And scripting allows you to do that. You can parse through those log files.
Okay.
You can find those patterns. You can even, use it for basic threat detection and response actions.
So it's about making it easier to analyze all that data.
Exactly. It's about efficiency. It's
Yeah.
about finding things that you might miss
Right.
if you were doing everything manually.
Okay. So we've talked about those three big technical areas, but what about some of maybe the softer skills, the things that maybe aren't as obvious that people don't always think about when they think about a SOC analyst? What are some of those,
Yeah,
those skills that are still really important for success?
absolutely. So the resources really highlighted the importance of understanding those core security concepts.
Right. So it's not just about memorizing definitions.
No,
It's about understanding the why.
exactly. It's about understanding how these things work,
Right.
why they're important, what their limitations are.
Okay.
You also need to be able to communicate effectively.
Right. So documentation is important,
So important.
but you also need to be able to communicate verbally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to be able to explain your findings clearly.
Yeah.
Describe the actions that you've taken
Right.
so that everyone is on the same page.
Yeah.
And then networking,
Right. Building your network.
building your network,
Uh-huh.
connecting with other people in the cybersecurity field.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to learn from others, to share knowledge,
Right.
to stay up to date on those latest threats
Yeah.
and trends.
So what are some specific steps that someone can take?
Yeah, let's get practical.
Yeah, let's get into the actionable advice.
Okay, so first of all, get hands-on experience.
Okay.
And, these days you don't need to have a fancy lab. There's some great platforms out there. Platforms like TryHackMe, Blue Team Labs.
Yeah.
These are really
They
cool.
gamify cybersecurity.
Exactly. They're gamified.
Yeah.
So you can actually practice those real-world scenarios in a safe environment.
Right. So you're not going to break anything.
You're not going to break anything.
Right.
And it's a really fun way to learn.
Yeah.
The resources also recommended setting up a home lab.
Okay.
You don't need fancy equipment. You can use virtualization software.
Right.
So you can run multiple operating systems,
Okay.
and you can experiment with different security tools.
Okay.
And they specifically mention trying out SIEM tools like Splunk.
Right.
you can get a free version of Splunk.
Hmm.
So you can actually start to see how logs are collected and analyzed.
Right. So getting familiar with the actual software that they would be using
Exactly.
in a real job. What about certifications? Are there certain certifications that someone should pursue?
Yeah, certifications can be really helpful,
Okay.
particularly, for demonstrating that baseline level of knowledge to potential employers.
Right.
So, good starting point.
Yeah.
CompTIA Security Plus Drab.
Right.
There are some more SOC-specific certifications, like Blue Team Level 1.
Okay.
These could be a good way to validate that you understand those key concepts,
Yeah.
and you know what you're talking about. But remember, employers value hands-on experience
Right.
a lot.
Yeah.
So the certifications are good, but they're not everything.
Right. It's the combination
It's the combination.
of both.
Exactly.
So besides the hands-on practice, setting up a home lab, and getting those certifications, what else can someone do?
Engaging with the
Mhm.
cybersecurity community.
Okay.
That can be so valuable.
Yeah.
Join online forums, join relevant LinkedIn groups, and participate in Capture the Flag competition.
Right. CTS.
CTFs.
Mhm.
These are great ways to learn new skills, to network, and to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
It's like finding your tribe. It's
Yeah.
finding your community.
And you learn alongside them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, document your learning journey.
Okay.
Write blog posts about what you're learning, share those insights on social media, build a portfolio.
Yeah, I think that's really important because it's one thing to learn something, but it's another thing to be able to explain it to someone else.
Absolutely.
Right.
And when you document it, not only are you solidifying your own understanding,
Yeah.
you're also demonstrating your capabilities to others.
Right. So it's almost like a forcing function to make sure that you actually understand what you're learning.
It is.
Yeah.
And it also helps you build up that portfolio.
Right. So you have something to show potential employers.
Exactly.
So to kind of wrap up here, I think the big takeaways are that a SOC analyst is a really critical role
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
cybersecurity. It's the front lines.
It is.
It's that first line of defense against all the bad stuff that's happening out there. And the people who are successful in those roles have those strong foundational skills.
Yeah. And they're always learning.
Right, and they're always learning and they're always adapting because the threat landscape is always changing.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that really came through in all the resources was just how demanding this field is.
Right, it's not a 9 to 5 job.
It's on.
It's something where you have to be really passionate
Yeah.
about it and really dedicated to staying on top of everything that's happening.
Hmm.
But it's also incredibly rewarding.
It is.
You're protecting people, you're protecting organizations from real threats.
And you're making a difference.
Yeah, you're making a difference. So for you, our listener, I think the question that you need to ask yourself is what aspect of this role do you find the most compelling?
Yeah. Or maybe the most challenging.
Right.
Is it the technical skills?
Yeah.
Is it the
Yeah.
communication skills?
Is it the analytical side of it?
Exactly.
What really speaks to you?
And then how can you focus on that area?
Right.
How can you develop those skills?
Right. And how can you turn that into an advantage as
Exactly.
you're trying to break into this field? I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.